Hello, this is Sherlock with Elementary Airsoft, and today we're taking a look at NPO's V3 gearbox. This one in particular is from the VSK 94. I believe I got that right. Or 9A91U or 9A91 family of guns. It's the same, pretty much same gearbox they use in the VSS as well, that just has a different motor cage. So we'll be going over and looking at the quality components used and how good it is put together. Because I feel like a lot of the info within the US or in English doesn't really, I feel like, indicate or talk about at least the latest ones. This has just got to me in fall of 2020 here, so let's get into it. So right here, I guess we'll start with the 3-cell. This is a 3-cell 25 to 50C battery on semi. And flip it into auto. The spring in here is pretty heavy because it's the card that came with it. And this is a 2-cell 25 to 50C battery. Not spectacular, but not bad either. But the spring in here is pretty heavy. I'm going to say M140 to M150 range. The card, which came with the gun, states 153 meters per second, which would be more or less in a .2 that's going to be about 500 FPS. So there is a reasonable amount of spring that it is pulling back. Let's get into this. I will note, if you notice, there was a slight amount of whine. This motor cage did not come with a grub screw for setting the motor engagement. So that's something that I need to fix or solve, but I won't do that in this movie or in this video review here. But otherwise, the shimming from shooting at the shimming bit sounded good. I wasn't getting any whine or anything from the gears. It was just this meshing here. Let's disconnect. Wiring is sort of your typical standard. It does come standard AEG. It's a bit flimsy in my opinion. Could go with a bit heavier or a nice like teflon coated wire. Not a whole lot of people really use that though. Let's get the top off here. Go. And it does have a quick change spring guide. And we are under full compression, it seems. So let us disengage our cutoff lever. Back forward. Well, this should be much easier to do. Got our spring out. Spring is non-linear. We do have a ball bearing spring guide here. And this top screw has been red Loctited in place because you can see some red Loctite that leaked out, so that's good. It's not going to come undone. Should last a good long while. We do have a red, don't know what the proper term for this is, like the gear plate or gear cover for the V3 gearbox. In my opinion, it would have been great if they could have used a black one, because you can see it a little bit when the replica is assembled. Off screen, literally everything on my table is sticking to the motor. Motor is a pretty high torque motor, judging from the feel of it. It is neodymium magnets, so it is very, very magnetic. Our bushings here, I'd have to check it when it's out, but I think they're steel. They look like a sintered steel manufacturer. Nozzle looks to be an aluminum O-ringed nozzle. Find out here in just a second. trigger has a slightly non-standard bit here for this particular gun, just due to how the fire selector works for the safety there. So the VSK 94 here takes a modified, I don't know what the trigger linkage part. Go. Let's carefully open it. I don't want to lose any of my shims. I should have talked about shimming beforehand. Oh, I guess I didn't fully decock it. So let's just pull out this whole assembly quick. We'll pull out our AR latch so nothing's flapping around. Okay, everything's sort of in place. We can talk about everything real quick for reassembly. So our nozzle here, this is an O-ringed nozzle. Our cylinder head, double O-ring. It's got a thicker pad than your average cylinder head, which is nice. Piston looks like a full, it's a full metal rack. Well, I guess technically not full metal. We're missing the last tooth, which is good. Aluminum piston head, ventilated. And it does have a bearing guide inside. Checking our air seal. Here is perfect within the cylinder. Let's bring you guys get back. We'll check our AOE here as well as the air seal with the nozzle. So checking AOE. This is fully forward and at rest. AOE, it could be a little bit further back, about 0.5 millimeter. Would be perfect for engagement. It does get full engagement to the tooth rack, so it isn't sitting too high or too low. So let's back this way. Put you back forward. So how am I going to do this? We'll hold this firm here so I can seal this. We do lose some compression to the nozzle, so using a different nozzle of the same length, perhaps a bit better O-ring seal there, would be a wise choice. Or that's maybe about the only downfall that I can see so far looking at it. Our trigger here isn't your standard contacts. They do use a microswitch, which is great. It does have a bit of a tactile feel or cutoff that you can sort of feel on the trigger. In terms of trigger slide and all that stuff, it's a bit better designed than your standard TM spec or TM styled one with the two contacts and the sled that drives into it. It doesn't use a MOSFET or anything that in the wiring. That would be, in my opinion, a thing that I would definitely consider doing if I'm still running this as an AEG, as well as I'd potentially look at bumping up the wiring to something a little bit nicer or allow as much current as the motor could possibly want, and never wear out over time. So that pretty much covers everything here, aside of the gears, which I'll get to right now. Okay, so just checking, the bushings are magnetic, so they are a sintered steel, which is cool and or good. And an interesting thing is the gears here that they do use. Gears here are helical. And these, I'm not sure of OEM of manufacture, but these are helical gears, and they're 100 to 200 ratio ones, which, if memory serves me right, that is roughly about like a 20 to 1 ratio. I don't really have a good way of checking it because it's the ratio of motor revolutions to 1 revolution of your sector gear here. Let's not lose those. It's an interesting choice. So we have a high torque motor and then arguably torque up gears. That being said, on their website, if I recall correctly, or like these are sort of advertised as you can put whatever spring in here you want and they will work. Well, any normal spring off the market in there and they will work. So that might be part of the reason. I don't know of any OEM that really installs or builds gearboxes by default with them, so I feel like that's sort of a special ask. There isn't a ton of brands that really put these together. Or a ton of brands that really make the helical gears. So it's kind of an interesting choice. I haven't personally had a ton of experience with it, so honestly, at least one of these I will probably run stock just to see how they work out. I know they're supposed to be a little bit quieter, but they do come with the caveat of they're very particular to be shimmed well vertically in terms of how and where the gears mesh together. That is, they can get noisy or they can potentially wear faster than a normal gear. Otherwise, if shimmed properly, they are in theory more durable and or stronger because you have more contact area between the gear teeth when they mesh. So definitely pros and cons there. That being said, looking at it, the engagement between the gears here, and sorry because my camera's ceiling mounted, I can't really show you this. The gapping between the gear and the two gears is pretty much done perfectly. I'm not sure if I would even touch this or improve upon it because it's done quite excellently. The amount of lubrication or grease that they have inside is just pretty much just the right amount that you need. In terms of the gears themselves, they do seem well made. I'm not seeing any warping and stuff that you can sometimes see on like SHS gear sets. You have a nice large brass delayer chip. All of the helical bits, so the helical bit on the bottom, this guy, or your spur gear, and the bottom half of your sector gear are all made out of what looks to be a hardened steel. The top of this is still a sintered steel for the rest of the gears. So overall, pretty good in terms of your gears. I guess let's put this guy back together now. So overall, internal quality I'd say is quite good. Out of the box, if you're looking to improve performance, the one thing that I would probably suggest taking a look at or considering is really just the nozzle here. If you improved your nozzle fitment here, you would lose less air, and it could be just whatever brand of cylinder head they're using or the brand of the nozzle. It could be a fluke, but I'm betting they probably use the same parts for all of them. But yeah, that's really the main knock that I would give there. Don't want to lose my shims there. I gotta get my air latch. Air latch is pretty much looks like your standard affair. Also same sintered steel. Should be fine. You do have a good number of cutouts on your bevel gear here for the air latch, which is it's always a nice thing, or I like it personally. So let's close her back up and we can talk briefly about the shim job, because that's easier to do when it's closed. Make sure everything lines up. Yeah. And just get the trigger set into its sled. Close this up. I'll be using this is a torque screwdriver, so it's designed so you don't over torque your screws. And it's set at 5 inch pounds. which is about the right number for these screws, which are M3s, I believe, and into a pot metal. It's just so you don't over torque it or damage the screw or the threads. Guess also maybe of note, the trigger on this unit is not made out of steel. It is on the VSS. So the VSK trigger is not steel, but the VSS is. So, now that we are back together, let's talk a little bit about shimming. So, in terms of shim jobs out of the box, this is one of the better ones that I've seen. So basically you want a very tiny amount of play in your gear, side to side. You want it just barely perceptible. You don't want it squeezing too hard that it starts creating increased friction on it from it squeezing in on the sides, being hard to rotate. But you don't want it too little either that it's slopping around. And especially too with these helical gears, that is undesirable. And there is a little bit of resistance from our cutoff lever here. But all of them seem pretty good. The loosest of the lot may be our sector gear here, or spur gear, excuse me. And it looks like it's moving less than a tenth. So this could maybe use one of the thinnest shims that I have. Otherwise, both these two gears are pretty much perfect. So out of the box, I honestly haven't seen anything with this good of shimming at all before, and that's from the likes of Crytek, ICS, which I would say both do a pretty respectable job. ICS has been honestly really good out of the box in my experience in terms of the shimming that they do. Crytek, maybe not quite as good. G&G, from the couple that I've worked on, have been okay, but I would sort of put them below Crytek. I don't remember if I've worked inside of one of the newer VFCs, so like the Avalons, but in general, like this is, if you had this shimmed by a tech, or like your average tech, I don't think I'd be disappointed in the shim job on it, and that's, I feel like, saying a lot. So it's really quite good, and it's quite good for the fact of what type of gears that they're using. So like they specifically did a really good job with something that needs them to do a really good job on. And there you go. So really, in terms of out of the box, I would say, and or if NPO, if you're watching, it'd be great if we could get a black part here. It'd be nice to use a bit higher quality wire. I think probably the biggest gripe out of any of them, and the biggest one that's going to hurt your performance, is the air seal on the nozzle to the cylinder head. It's better than some stock ones. I mean, it is using an O-ring nozzle, but it's just not getting a seal, especially when you have a perfect seal and everything else. It's like you ticked almost all the boxes, but you just missed out there. So that's slightly a downer. I'll see if I can find a nozzle the same size that'll fit or give me a better seal. Or if not, I'll have to swap out the cylinder head. And then lastly, engagement could be a touch better, but honestly, pretty good. Like some of the best engagement that I've also seen out of the box. really in terms of internal parts that normally, like if I'm taking a gun that I'd use a lot, I would consider upgrading bushings or gears. Gears here are sort of an interesting question for me, just because I'm not experienced too much in the Helical gears. Personally, I would have went for a high-speed gear with that high torque motor, and you would have gotten a lot better trigger response. However, I can certainly see where they're coming from or what they did when using the thing of it'll pull whatever spring you need, and maybe over in Russia and stuff, your events have different FPS regulations or requirements where you can shoot a lot harder or hotter, so that may come into play there. But overall, honestly, one of the best stock gearboxes that I've seen in a long time. I mean, it doesn't have any fancy frills like a split gearbox or anything like that, but still really well made, pretty good in the parts quality department. Yeah, the gears aren't siegetek or anything like that, but it's at least everything in here feels and looks aftermarket quality in the out-of-box experience. So that's honestly excellent, and then the work and installation that was done in here is excellent. And this wasn't for special review or anything. This was just guns that I ordered from them. So there you have it. Hopefully this has helped you or helped somebody, and or hopefully NPO will continue to improve or even fix up a couple little things further. That would be even amazing as well. So thanks for watching, and hope you enjoy. One more quick addition to make here at the end. I mentioned it in an earlier shoot of the same review, but I think they would also, or NPO would be also very befit to use something like this. This is a Retro Arms QSC spring guide screw. So basically, the problem with running a quick change spring guide with something that doesn't have a stock is that it can wobble around in operation, like so. But having this is just pretty much a giant pan head, or like a screw with a large washer built into it. That's M4, so it threads into your quick change spring guide here. And what that's going to do is lock it in position and keep it from flopping around as the spring gets compressed. So, probably look for another one. I did look inside the VSS, and that definitely seemed like there'd be just enough room for something nice and low profile like this. So I'm going to give it a try here when I assemble this, and that's going to be in its own video. But I think that would also be a large boon, or I would recommend anyone, if you have it, or to find something like this or solution like that if you're using a quick change spring guide in one of these guns, or even just a V3 gearbox where nothing is holding it in. If you have the space in your body, definitely secure that so it isn't moving around.